I used to believe that love, real love, could heal anything. I was the kind of woman who planned her life around hope, the type who believed in happy endings, who thought that if you gave someone your all, they'd never hurt you. I used to think loyalty meant something. That was before I met Ethan. Ethan walked into my life like a breath of fresh air on a suffocating summer day. I met him at a charity event I helped organize downtown. I was standing near the drinks table, trying to make small talk with donors, when he appeared beside me. Tall, confident, with that kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He cracked a joke about how he didn't belong there because he'd only come for the free food, and I laughed harder than I should have. That laugh was the beginning of everything. We started talking that night, and before I knew it, we were sharing stories about our lives. How I worked in marketing for a small publishing company. How he was trying to get his own photography business off the ground. He said he'd moved to town recently for a fresh start, and something about that phrase stuck with me. I'd been through a rough breakup the year before, and I was craving a fresh start too. By the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. And even though I told myself I'd play it cool, I couldn't stop checking my phone the next day, hoping he'd text. When he finally did, my heart practically jumped out of my chest. Our first date was at a little Italian restaurant by the lake. It was casual, but he made it feel like a scene out of a movie. He held doors open for me, complimented my dress, and listened, really listened, when I talked. He told me he'd been through some tough times, but was ready to build something real. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. We became inseparable. He'd pick me up from work with coffee, surprise me with Polaroid photos he took of us, send random texts like, "Can't believe I got this lucky." I fell fast, and I fell hard. My friends warned me to slow down, that everything felt too perfect, but I ignored them. When someone makes you feel like you're finally enough, it's easy to silence the voices of caution. After 6 months, he moved in with me. I told myself it made sense, we were always together anyway, and he said his lease was up. I wanted to believe it was love. But little by little, small cracks started to show. He'd stay out late, saying he was meeting clients. Sometimes his phone would ring and he'd step outside to take the call. When I'd ask who it was, he'd brush it off. "Just work stuff, babe. Don't stress." Then there was the money thing. He said he was waiting on payments from a few big gigs, so I covered rent for a while. I didn't mind. I told myself that's what partners do. They help each other. But I started to notice he always had money for drinks with friends, new clothes, and fancy camera gear. Still, I pushed my doubts down. I wanted to believe in him. It wasn't until I found the messages that everything shattered. It was a Thursday night. Ethan had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he showered. Normally, I would have never snooped. I hated the idea of invading someone's privacy. But that night, something in me couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at my gut for weeks. So I looked. At first, it was just normal stuff. Emails, social media tabs. Then I saw a chat window open on Instagram. Her name was Kara Kiss. I clicked. The first message I saw hit me like a punch to the chest. "I can't wait to have you in my bed again this weekend." I froze. My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely scroll, but I kept reading. There were dozens of messages, pictures, plans, compliments. He called her baby. He told her he loved how she made him feel alive. My world spun around me. I felt my heart break in real time, like someone was carving into it with a dull knife. When he came out of the shower, towel around his waist, humming some song like nothing had happened, I just stared at him. I couldn't even speak at first. Finally, I said, "Who's Kara?" The color drained from his face. He froze mid-step. "What?" "I heard you," I said, my voice trembling. "Who is she?" He tried to play dumb, tried to lie. But I could see it in his eyes, the panic, the guilt. When I showed him the messages, he didn't even apologize. He just sighed and muttered, "You weren't supposed to see that. You weren't supposed to find out." That told me everything. He tried to spin it after that, said it didn't mean anything, that it was just a mistake, that I'd been distant lately and he needed comfort. The excuses made me sick. I told him to leave. I wanted him out of my apartment, out of my life. He packed a bag and left that night. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor afterward, surrounded by the ghost of everything I thought we had. The coffee mugs we bought together, the photos he'd taken of me, the smell of his cologne still lingering in the air. I cried until the sun came up. For weeks, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him saying he was sorry, that he wanted to fix things, even though I knew he didn't deserve another chance. Love does that to you. It makes you want to forgive the person who broke you. But then something strange happened. A few weeks after he left, I started getting calls from unknown numbers. When I'd answer, there'd be silence, or sometimes heavy breathing. One day, I got a DM from an account with no profile picture. "He's not who you think he is." I ignored it at first, thinking it was some troll. But then another message came. "Check his other account, the one under EJ Gray. You'll see." I hesitated for a long time before I searched it. And when I did, my entire body went cold. It was Ethan. Same photos, same smile, but a different name, a different life. On that account, he wasn't Ethan, the struggling photographer. He was EJ Gray, a man engaged to a woman in another state. The profile was full of engagement photos, pictures of him kissing another woman. The caption on one photo said, "Can't wait to marry my forever girl." My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. I clicked through more photos, more comments, and there it was. Kara, the same woman from the messages. They weren't just fooling around. They were engaged. And I wasn't the first woman he'd done this to. As I scrolled, I saw comments from other women. Some deleted, some left visible. Things like, "You did the same to me. Guess you didn't change, huh? Run, girl. He's lying to you." That's when I realized Ethan wasn't just a cheater. He was a professional liar, a con artist in love's disguise. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. Because this time, the girl he betrayed wasn't going to cry quietly and move on. This time, I was going to make him pay. After discovering Ethan's double life, I couldn't stop shaking. The anger burned under my skin, but beneath it was something colder. Clarity. For the first time since meeting him, I saw him for exactly what he was, a manipulator. Every compliment, every late night "I love you," every promise about our future, all of it had been a carefully rehearsed performance. I had fallen for a man who probably rehearsed his lines in the mirror before meeting me. For days, I replayed everything in my head. Every red flag I'd ignored, every moment that didn't feel right. The nights he didn't come home until 2 a.m. The random business trips. The client dinners. The times he said his phone died for hours. The pieces of the puzzle I refused to see before were now slicing me open with the truth. But I wasn't going to be his victim. Not again. Not this time. The first thing I did was print out everything. Screenshots of the messages, photos from his fake account, even comments from other women. I created a folder labeled Ethan Truth and kept it in my desk drawer. Something inside me told me to hold on to the evidence.
It wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about accountability. I needed to know who this man really was. So I started digging. His photography business suddenly seemed like the perfect cover for his double life. He claimed to travel for destination shoots, but when I checked his business page, half the photos were stolen from other photographers. The reviews? Fake. The email listed on his site linked back to a free account created just 6 months before I met him. My gut told me Ethan wasn't even his real name. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Marlene. She was sharp, direct, and didn't waste time sugarcoating things. When I explained the situation, she gave me this look, the kind of look that said she'd heard this story 100 times before, but would help me anyway. Men like that, she said, they're predators. They live off women's trust. Let's find out who he really is. Within a week, she called me back. You might want to sit down for this, she said. Ethan, or rather, Ethan James Gray, had at least 4 different aliases. He'd lived in 3 states over the past 5 years. Under one name, he had a criminal record for fraud. Nothing violent, but enough to show a pattern. Under another, he'd been married to a woman named Rachel in Colorado. They divorced 2 years before he met me. When Marlene sent me the documents, I stared at them in disbelief. His entire life was a rotating carousel of lies. One woman to fund him, another to love him, another to believe in him. Then he'd vanish, leaving wreckage behind. And Kara, the fiancé, she had no idea. At first, I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me wanted to expose him immediately, to blast his entire history across the internet, but another part of me, the part that still couldn't believe how deep the betrayal ran, wanted to make sure I hit him where it would hurt most. Public humiliation would sting, but I wanted something permanent, something he couldn't sweet-talk his way out of. So I waited. I planned. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to crawl back into my life. He started small, a text here, a message there. I miss you. Can we talk? I know I messed up, but I can't stop thinking about you. The nerve of that man. I ignored him every single message. But ignoring him didn't stop him. It only fueled him. He started showing up near my work. Once I caught sight of his car parked across the street. Another time I saw him in the grocery store pretending to shop in the same aisle. When our eyes met, he gave that same charming smile he used to melt my heart. This time it made my blood boil. I told Marlene about it, and she advised me to keep my distance but document everything. Guys like him don't handle rejection well, she warned. He might be looking for control. That word, control, stuck with me, because that's exactly what he'd always had. He controlled the narrative, the emotions, the image of who he was. He played puppet master while the rest of us danced. Not anymore. Started documenting every encounter. I took pictures of his car when I saw it near my job. I saved every text. Slowly, I built my case. Not for court, but for karma. Because I was going to make sure Ethan's next con collapsed before it even began. That's when I reached out to Kara. At first, I wasn't sure how to approach her. I didn't want to sound like some jealous ex trying to ruin her relationship. But I also couldn't stay silent knowing she was about to marry a man who lied about everything. So I sent her a simple message from a throwaway account. Hi, you don't know me, but I think we have something in common. His name is Ethan. Or maybe EJ Gray to you. Please hear me out before you block me. I waited 3 days before she replied. Who are you? She wrote. What do you want? I told her the truth. I sent her screenshots, photos, even his criminal record. I didn't hold back. For a while, she didn't respond. Then, late that night, I got a single message. Can we talk? We ended up on a video call that same night. Kara looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. When she spoke, her voice trembled. He told me you were his crazy ex, she said. He said you were obsessed and wouldn't let him go. I almost laughed. It was exactly what he told me about his last ex. He's been doing this for years, I said. You're not the first, and if we don't stop him, you won't be the last. For the next 2 hours, we compared notes. Messages, photos, dates. It was like watching a horror movie starring both of us. Every story lined up. The same lies, the same sweet phrases, the same promises of forever. He had a script, and we'd both played our parts perfectly. When the call ended, Kara looked directly into the camera and said, "Let's ruin him." That's when I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Over the next few weeks, Kara and I became unlikely allies. We started digging deeper, reaching out to the other women who'd commented on his engagement photos. Some ignored us, some blocked us, but 2 others replied. One was a woman named Tessa from Arizona who said she'd dated him 3 years ago and lost nearly $8,000 when he convinced her to invest in his business. Another was Natalie from Florida, who said he'd ghosted her after promising to move in with her and left her with unpaid bills in her name. Piece by piece, we built a network of his victims, 5 women, each with a story that followed the same pattern. He'd charm them, use them, drain them, and disappear. And now we had proof. One of the women, Tessa, had a friend who worked in local news. When she heard the story, she said, "This guy's a serial relationship scammer. If you have documents, I can make sure people see them." It was tempting, but I wasn't ready to go public yet. I wanted to time it right before his wedding. Because yes, despite everything, the wedding was still on. Ethan was set to marry Kara in 2 weeks. Apparently, he had convinced her that the rumors were lies spread by jealous exes. The audacity made my skin crawl. But Kara played along. She acted like she believed him. She sent me updates through a secret email thread we shared. She told me he was planning a lavish ceremony fully funded by her parents. His photography business wasn't just fake, it was a front for his real hustle. Marrying women with money, draining them, and vanishing before anyone caught on. But this time, his escape plan was going to fail. We started preparing our revenge. Kara made sure he used his real name on the wedding documents, the one tied to his criminal record. She also quietly shared all the evidence we'd collected with the local authorities, just in case things went sideways. I prepared a detailed expose with every photo, every message, every woman's testimony, ready to publish on social media at the exact right moment. We agreed on the plan. She'd go through with the wedding just enough to keep him confident, and I'd be there, waiting in the shadows. Ethan had no idea what was coming. 2 days before the wedding, I got one last text from him. "I wish things had been different between us. I really did love you, you know." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "No, Ethan, you loved control. And you're about to lose it." I didn't send another word, because this time I wasn't the broken woman crying on the kitchen floor. I was the woman he never saw coming. And on his wedding day, every secret he ever tried to bury was going to rise to the surface in front of everyone he thought he'd fooled. The morning of the wedding felt like the quiet before a storm. I woke up before dawn, heart pounding like a trapped animal. It wasn't fear this time. It was a specific, focused kind of adrenaline. The kind that sharpens everything into a single point. Today was the day we'd been building toward. Months of digging, collecting, planning, and waiting. For the moment when every lie he'd told would be dragged into the light. I dressed in something simple and unassuming. A navy dress that wouldn't attract attention, but would let me move easily if I needed to. My hands trembled as I slid on a single silver necklace. Kara had suggested I wear something neutral so I wouldn't be noticed by the wedding party, and she was right. The venue was a small vineyard outside the city, intimate and picturesque, the perfect backdrop for a life someone wanted to manufacture. Fairy lights hung from the trees. Rows of white chairs faced a wooden arbor. In the distance, the hills rolled like a painting. Kara and I had been in contact all morning through a burner phone she kept hidden in her clutch. She'd sent me a string of short messages. nervous but steady. She sounded different than the girl who'd been naively planning her forever. This Kara was focused, fierce, and ready. "You sure you want me there?" I asked through the line, even though I already knew the answer. "Absolutely," she replied. "Promise me you'll stand by the back row with the others. Don't be obvious. When I give you the signal, pull up the thread and start posting. Don't stop." "Got it," I said. The echo of the plan sounded unreal. It was surgical simplicity. Expose him publicly, ruin the performance he'd rehearsed, and let the truth do the rest. We'd arranged for the expose to go live across multiple platforms simultaneously. The local news contact we'd worked with was on standby. Everyone who'd been hurt by him had agreed not to contact the bride's family directly because we knew messengers get dismissed. This had to hit in a way that couldn't be ignored. Proof, witnesses, and timing. When I arrived at the vineyard, the air smelled like cut grass and perfume. Guests were arriving in their Sunday rest. Parents, friends, cousins, coworkers. The atmosphere was warm and joyful, full of that buoyant optimism weddings always try to manufacture. I felt like a soldier in plain clothes slipping into the enemy's camp. I found my place at the back, near a cluster of trees where the light filters in and no one cares to look closely. Tessa and Natalie were already there, flanking me like two allies I'd come to depend on. We exchanged tight, wordless smiles. Around us, other women had drifted in, quietly taking seats further down the aisle. There were 6 of us in total, survivors who'd turned their pain into a plan. We all had something in common beyond the obvious: a stack of screenshots, bank statements, canceled checks, and a folder of messages that read like a litany of deceit. We'd printed everything and organized it into one single Google Drive folder that would be shared with the world the instant Kara gave the signal. We'd coordinated with the friend at the local news who'd prepared a segment, and we'd lined up several social media accounts ready to tag the venue, the photographer, and the hashtag to ensure maximum spread. I watched the guests take their seats. Men adjusted bow ties. Kids chased each other through the grass. I kept scanning for him. It was an awful habit of mine, like checking for a wound that hadn't closed yet. And then he appeared, Ethan, in a suit that fit him as perfectly as his lies had fit into every conversation. He stood by the arbor, hands folded, smile practiced and sincere. He looked radiant. That word stung. He looked radiant as the people around him laughed, throwing confetti at the air in celebration. Carol walked down the aisle like a woman in a dream. Her dress was classic, white lace with sleeves that fluttered when she walked. She hid her strength in the softness of the fabric, the way she smiled at her mother and then at him. I could see the momentary hesitation in her eyes when she reached the arbor. For a second, she looked at the crowd like someone searching for a life beyond the scripted vows. Maybe a shadow of hope still believed in him. Maybe she wanted, just for a breath, for love to be real. But then she steadied herself and faced Ethan. The officiant began the ceremony with the usual platitudes about love and vows. People whispered and took pictures. I remember the sound of a child's laughter, the distant chirp of birds, the soft rustle of the vines. It was surreal, an ordinary celebration where an extraordinary deception was about to be revealed. Ethan took Kara's hands and looked into her eyes with the kind of intensity he reserved for cameras, not people. He spoke his vows, words rehearsed and polished, about forever, cherishing, always. It was then that my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from Kara. Now. My pulse spiked, the signal we'd been waiting for. I opened the drive, took a breath, and started posting. At first, it was subtle. A single tweet from our local news contact quoting anonymous sources. Then a flood. Screenshots of his messages with Kara, photos of his other profiles, bank statements showing money transfers labeled as investments, witness statements from women he'd scammed. We tagged the venue, his business, and used the wedding hashtag. The comments began almost immediately. Astonishment, anger, disbelief. Phones popped up around me as other guests checked their feeds. Heads turned. Laughter in the back row curdled into confusion. Ethan's smile faltered. He tried to keep going, mechanical, like someone continuing an acting scene past the point the audience has started shouting. "I do," he said, and the officiant asked Kara to repeat. She did, but her voice was different, hollowed out by the moment. She squeezed his hands like she was holding onto an electric wire. At the same moment our post hit, the television vans outside the venue started to pull in. Our contact had called ahead. The social media avalanche had done its job. The story had leaked faster than he could silence it. Guests checked their phones and then scanned the faces around them, the way people look for a lightning rod in a storm. I could see Ethan's jaw working. He didn't know what to say. He mouthed something to Kara, maybe a plea, maybe a lie, but she stepped back. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to regain control, but the crowd had already shifted from celebration to spectacle. Whispers rose, rising into a hum. Someone shouted, "Is this real?" Another voice asked, "What did he do?" My hands were steady as I continued to post evidence. We posted PDFs and screenshots, organized and labeled. Proof 1, multiple aliases. Proof 2, fake accounts and engagement photos. Proof 3, financial transfers and witness testimony. Each upload was a blow. Ethan's composure cracked. He tried to reach for Kara and she flinched away as if his touch burned. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't just tears of betrayal. They were the taut, furious kind that come when someone realizes they've been a pawn. He turned to the crowd, and for the first time, his charm failed him. There was no polished line that could repair this. He spoke, something about misunderstandings and slander and people trying to ruin our day. His voice sounded paper-thin against the roar of notifications and murmurs. Then someone, maybe a distant cousin, maybe an old friend, yelled, "Show us proof!" And at that moment, my phone rang. It was Marlene, the PI, who'd arranged for a few last-minute items to be delivered to the venue. A stack of official documents that tied his name to past fraud convictions, a certified copy of a divorce decree, and records that proved the transfers to the women who'd been scammed. Marlene walked towards the front holding those papers like a badge. She handed them to Kara's mother, who opened them and read aloud. Her voice trembled with disbelief and then anger. The officiant stepped back, suddenly aware that he was presiding over a farce. Guests started pulling out their own devices, recording, tweeting, calling friends. The atmosphere turned electric with the bitter taste of exposed deceit. Ethan's panic became visible, his face flushed, hands fumbling. He looked like a man who had been puppeteering an orchestra only to discover the strings had been cut. He demanded silence. He asked people to leave their phones down. He demanded privacy. The audacity of attempting to salvage the scene by silencing the witnesses was astounding and pathetic all at once. He tried to grab Kara's hand again. She slapped it away.
A quiet ferocity that stunned the people nearest to them. "I can't do this," she said, voice steady now, almost theatrical in its clarity. "I can't marry someone who lied about his entire life. I can't stand at the altar with a man who's been cheating on me and scamming women." A guest shouted, "So what? You're canceling, right here?" Someone else hissed, "Do you have any proof?" As if the room had forgotten the streaming evidence breaking across phones. But the proof was there, visible, documented, undeniable. The local news crew set up microphones and began to film. Camera lights flashed as if they'd unwillingly been summoned to the worst performance of the year. Ethan's voice rose, slick and oily. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "We're being harassed. These are exes trying to ruin a day. Someone's been paid to fabricate evidence." But the record spoke louder than his words. The divorce decree, the fraud conviction, the bank transfers. These were official pieces of paper, signed, verified. No amount of charm could smooth over a certified document. Kara turned to him and said something that sounded like the end of their entire made-up life. "You did this on purpose," she said. "You made me believe in you so I'd give you everything. I gave you my trust, my family's money, and my wedding day." I felt my hands go cold and a strange sense of vindication, not because I enjoyed watching someone fall, but because the truth finally had a voice louder than his lies. The room was a mix of gasps and whispers, and that awkward human instinct to turn betrayal into gossip. And then he left.
He didn't storm out in a dramatic dash. He slipped away like a thief at twilight, head down, dodging cameras. He muttered something into the air about being slandered and ruined, the narrative he'd always used. He hopped into a waiting car, maybe a friend, maybe someone briefed to help him escape, and drove away before the police arrived. What he didn't realize was that we'd already called them. A woman who'd attended the wedding had a cousin in the county PD who happened to be a friend of Tessa's. By the time Ethan tried to get away, officers were already on the lookout, police reports filed, and cameras outside the venue streaming license plates. We'd planned for contingencies. He could run, but he couldn't hide from what we'd done. As the dust settled and guests shuffled out, some in shock, some in a rush of sympathy for Kara, I felt something unfamiliar, relief. The crowd dispersed in a kind of stunned slow motion. People hugged Kara's mother. Someone offered her a drink. The photographer, who, as it turned out, had been suspicious of Ethan for weeks, approached me quietly and said, "Thank you." I didn't feel like thanking anyone. I felt hollow and oddly invigorated. Kara sat on the back steps of the arbor, shaking, eyes dry. I sat beside her, and for a long time we didn't speak. Around us, the evidence continued to circulate online, picked up by local news, and splashed across morning shows by the time the sun rose the next day. "We did it," she whispered, voice small and raw. "No," I corrected her gently. "We started it. We made sure it couldn't finish." That night, I went home and watched as strangers reacted to what we'd done. The hashtag was trending. Messages poured in from women thanking us for exposing him. Men sent insults as if defending a liar was something to be proud of. My phone buzzed for hours. I felt each ping like a small tremor, reverberating through the world I'd shifted. But the story didn't end with social media outrage. The police contacted me 2 days later. Ethan had been stopped at a toll booth 2 hours away. His car contained multiple IDs, credit cards and other names, and evidence of financial transactions linked to other victims. He was arrested for fraud and identity theft, and that arrest set off a cascade of investigations. Lawyers, subpoenas, and official statements followed. We had not just toppled a man's illusion, we had triggered a legal chain that might finally hold him accountable. And yet, even as the justice machinery kicked in, something heavier stayed with me. There was no cinematic revenge that made everything right. The nights I lay awake, I still felt the ache of having been lied to. I still replayed the tender moments he'd faked. I still grieved for the person I thought I'd loved. But there was a new thing, a steel in my chest. The knowledge that when confronted with deceit, deliberate, destructive deceit, I could become furious enough not to break. I could organize, find allies, and act. I could stop being the passive character in someone else's story. When the judge eventually set bail hearings and court dates, the world watched. People called us courageous. Others labeled us as vindictive. Opinions swirled like leaves in an autumn wind. But the truth, slow, bureaucratic, and stubborn, kept moving forward. Ethan was out of sight, but not out of reach. The arrests and charges were only the beginning. There would be depositions, testimony, and lawyers skilled at twisting words. He would try to reconstruct his story, mend fences with anyone who would listen, and blame us for his fall. That was the playbook of someone who always manipulated perception. But for now, he was on the defensive. In the quiet that followed, I found myself thinking about something Marlene had said. People like him depend on silence. They count on the embarrassed to tuck away their truths, on the whispered apologies. Once you strip their silence away, they're naked. They don't know what to do. We'd stripped his silence away.
I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's smirk. That same smirk he wore when he first told me he loved me, when he thought I'd never see through him. But now, that smirk meant something else. It meant arrogance. It meant he still believed he'd won. By sunrise, I was ready. The hotel was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. I'd spent weeks setting this up, making sure every detail lined up perfectly. The private investigator had given me everything: his fake business receipts, his hidden bank accounts, and even the evidence that proved his so-called photography business was just a front for money laundering through his ex's company. But that wasn't the part I wanted justice for. What I wanted was the truth. I wanted everyone he'd deceived to see who he really was. Kara, for one, deserved to know the kind of man she was about to marry. I wasn't planning to show up at the ceremony. My goal was to make sure that when the vows began, the truth would arrive right on time. I had already sent the investigator's folder to the venue's manager, who agreed to help me after hearing the story. Apparently, she'd been cheated on too. There's something about betrayal that makes women unite without words. By 10:30 a.m., the first guests were arriving. Ethan had chosen some rustic vineyard outside the city. I watched from the parking lot, sitting in my car, hidden behind a line of trees. I could see the arch decorated with white roses and ivy, the chairs neatly arranged, and Kara in her lace gown, glowing. Though not with happiness, I realized, but with the naive kind of love I once had. My stomach twisted. She didn't deserve this. The plan was simple. During the reception's opening speech, the DJ would play a special video message. Ethan thought it was a slideshow of engagement photos. In reality, it was the video I had edited, a 10-minute compilation that would expose everything. At 11:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was the manager's text. "We're ready." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break my ribs. For a second, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Was this revenge or justice? Then I remembered the night I cried myself to sleep on the kitchen floor, the silence of those mysterious phone calls, the women he had left behind, the ones who'd warned me too late. Yes, this was justice. At noon, the ceremony began. I rolled down the window just enough to hear the faint hum of the officiant's voice. Ethan stood tall, confident, smiling at Kara like she was his world. He probably believed this was the start of his next scam. New wife, new name, new life. Then came the words that made my blood run cold. "Do you, Ethan James Gray, take this woman?" I couldn't listen to the rest. I turned on my phone's hotspot and made sure the upload link was active. The video was ready to play. A few minutes later, it happened. The DJ's voice echoed through the speakers. "Before we continue, Ethan has prepared something special to celebrate his journey of love." Then the screen flickered. At first, it showed their engagement photos. Soft music playing, smiling faces, the kind of montage you'd expect. Then, 10 seconds in, the tone shifted. The photos faded into screenshots, text messages, DMs, Ethan's words to Kara and to me, and then to other women. Gasps filled the air. The next image was a video clip. Ethan, half-dressed, on a video call with someone who wasn't Kara. His voice was unmistakable. Kara's bouquet dropped to the ground. The guests started murmuring. The music cut out completely. Ethan tried to rush toward the DJ booth, but by then it was too late. The next segment began playing. A voice recording from the private investigator's phone call with his business partner, revealing Ethan's fraudulent identity and the offshore account he used. The crowd turned chaotic. Some people shouted, others just stared. Kara's father stepped forward, demanding answers. And in the middle of it all, Ethan stood frozen, his face pale, jaw tight, looking like his entire world had crumbled. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I drove away as fast as I could, tears spilling down my cheeks, not from regret, but from release. It felt like years of pain were finally breaking loose, burning out of me like wildfire. By the time I reached the city limits, my phone had blown up with messages. One from Kara. "Was that you? Thank you. I wish I'd known sooner." Another from an unknown number, probably Ethan's. "You ruined my life." I didn't respond. He'd ruined his own life. I just handed him the mirror. That evening, I sat by the window of my apartment watching the sun go down. The world looked quieter somehow, peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Detective Lopez.
the woman who had taken over the PI's evidence for a federal review. "Miss Carter," she said, "we finished our report. Your ex wasn't just lying about his name, he's been using multiple identities to scam investors across 3 states. Your information helped us confirm his location." My heart skipped. "What happens now?" She said, "We have a warrant. He'll be in custody by tonight." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, maybe both. I thanked her, hung up again, and stared out the window again. The sunset had turned the sky orange and gold, the same colors Ethan once said reminded him of hope. For me, it didn't mean hope anymore. It meant closure. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I got one last text. They got him. 3 words. That's all it took. I lay in the dark, thinking of the girl I used to be, the one who believed love could fix everything. She died the day I saw those messages, but in her place, someone stronger was born. I wasn't the victim of Ethan's story anymore. I was the ending he never saw coming. The night Ethan was arrested, I didn't feel the rush I thought I would. There was no triumphant music, no victorious laughter echoing through my mind. Instead, there was silence. A deep, heavy quiet that settled in my chest like the last breath after a long storm. For months, I had dreamed about that moment. I imagined seeing his face when the handcuffs clicked shut. I wanted to watch him realize that his lies had finally caught up to him. But when it happened, when Detective Lopez called to confirm they had him in custody, all I did was sit there, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. I'd been holding my breath for too long. The next morning, I woke up to messages from almost everyone involved. The private investigator, the detective, even Kara. She'd written, "He's going to be indicted. Thank you for saving me before I married him. I owe you more than I can ever say." I didn't know what to reply. There was something strange about getting gratitude for something that had nearly destroyed me. For a long moment, I just stared at her message, trying to remember how it felt to be the one who didn't know, the one who still believed in him. In a way, I saw myself in her. I typed back, "You don't owe me anything. You deserved the truth. We all did." And I meant it. The following weeks passed in slow motion. I went back to work at the publishing company. Everyone treated me like I'd survived a hurricane, which I guess I had. My coworkers were kind, overly kind, the way people are when they don't know what to say. I smiled through it. I even managed to laugh again. But there were still nights when I'd wake up suddenly, heart pounding, half expecting to find Ethan in the kitchen making coffee like he used to, as if none of it had ever happened. It's strange how love leaves ghosts behind. One evening, about a month later, I got an email from the district attorney's office. Ethan had pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. They wanted me to give a statement at sentencing. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. I'd already gotten my closure. Seeing him again felt unnecessary, maybe even dangerous to my peace. But something inside me whispered that I needed to look him in the eye one last time. Not to hurt him, not to gloat, but to remind myself that he was just a man, not a monster, not a curse, just a flawed, broken person who'd chosen to destroy others for his own gain. So I went. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The fluorescent lights made everything look gray. Ethan sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, his expression empty. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. The man I'd fallen for, the one with the confident smile and the soft eyes, was gone. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, took a breath, and said, "Your Honor, I don't want revenge. I never did. I wanted the truth. I wanted to stop him from hurting anyone else the way he hurt me. What Ethan did wasn't just about lies or money. It was about trust. He took advantage of people who believed in him, who saw good in him when maybe there wasn't any left. I hope this sentence helps him understand the damage he's done. I paused then, looked at him directly, and said quietly, I hope one day you find a way to be honest, not for us, but for yourself. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't even raise his eyes. But I saw the flicker, a flash of guilt maybe, or shame. And for the first time, I realized I didn't care what it was. His feelings weren't my responsibility anymore.
5 years. I didn't cheer, I just nodded. Justice had done its job. After the hearing, Kara found me in the hallway. She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for exposing him, for being braver than I could have been." I smiled faintly. We were both brave. We just had to survive different parts of his story. That was the last time I saw her. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life, piece by piece. I moved into a new apartment closer to the coast. I adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Milo, who somehow knew exactly when I needed comfort. I started journaling again, writing about what I'd learned from everything that happened. One entry still stands out to me. You can't control who betrays you. You can only control what you do afterward. Some people break you to see if you'll stay broken. Others test you without realizing they're sharpening your strength. That became my mantra. By summer, my life started to feel like mine again. I'd started hiking, traveling, taking photos. Ironically, the same hobby Ethan once claimed was his passion. But where his photos were about performance, mine were about healing. Capturing light after the dark. One afternoon, while walking Milo along the beach, I ran into someone unexpected. The investigator, Julia. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "I thought you'd be halfway across the world by now." "Maybe next year," I said, laughing softly. "For now, I'm just living." She nodded. "You know, I've done a lot of cases. Most women don't fight back, but you did. You didn't just survive. You stopped him. You should be proud of that." I looked out at the water. The waves rolled in and out, steady, rhythmic, endless. "Yeah," I said quietly, "I am." As she walked away, I knelt to pet Milo, who wagged his tail, sand sticking to his fur. The sky was a deep orange, just like that night months ago when Ethan had been arrested. But this time, the color didn't remind me of pain. It reminded me of peace, of rebirth. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the stars. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number again. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. The text said, "You don't know me, but I was one of the women he scammed 2 years ago. I saw the story online. Thank you for ending it. You saved a lot of us." I smiled. My story had made its way into the world, not as a tragedy, but as a warning. Maybe even as hope for someone else. I put my phone down and whispered to the night, "I saved myself too." Then, for the first time since Ethan walked into my life, I felt free.